Welcome back to an episode with the FirstGen Psychologist, Lisette. Woo!
Yeah.
This is part two with her, and in
Mhm.
this part, we get to talk about your area of expertise. And we chose the topic guilt to talk about for
Mhm.
today's episode. As you likely know, first gens tend to experience that in many aspects or times of their lives, I would
Mhm.
say.
Mhm.
So I think the goal of today's quick episode will be maybe to dive deeper into like what that experience is actually like. Why do we experience it so much? And how would you recommend that someone starts to like navigate that?
Yeah. No, Priscilla, I'm so happy that to be here. I'm so happy that we'll be talking about guilt because it is something that is very common for I think everyone experiences guilt, and it's not exclusive to first gens, but I think first gens have this unique experience of guilt. Um, so when I talk about this, I always like to start off with just defining guilt. So Priscilla, I'm going to put you on the spot for a second. Like when you
Okay.
with guilt, like what does it mean to feel guilty? Like what is guilt?
Ooh, like a physical sensation is kind of like the bad anxiety, bad
Okay.
butterflies. Like,
Yeah.
maybe it's like I'm excluding. That's what it feels
Mhm.
like. Yeah.
Yeah. It feels like there's a mismatch, a misalignment of something.
Yeah.
You said like when you say excluding, it's like you're doing something that you wouldn't want someone to do to you.
Hmm.
Right. So it's like there's just a discomfort. And so I,
Yeah.
I love that. And thank you. Thank you. But with guilt, yeah, I think what you described is some of the how it manifests for us, right? But at the core, what guilt is, we experience guilt when our actions are doing something that are maybe not consistent with our values, whether it's our moral values or, dare I say it, our cultural values, right? So like what we grew up with. So I like to define it because I don't think that we think about it like that very much, right? I think we always think about guilt as very negative, and just a feeling we want to avoid. But but guilt is a feeling that's telling you information. It's saying something's not sitting well with me right now. And First gens, I think, culturally, because of there's this dynamic of silence around we don't talk about our feelings, this like we don't share this, you figure that out on your own. We can go deep into the gender roles around who's allowed to have feelings about this too. Um, but we're going to stick to just to focus on guilt. But I'll say like I share these so that you can think about them, at least the folks listening or tuning in, think about how all of these different layers of your identities, all the different intersectional identities you have, like also impact your experience of guilt, right? How many different pressures you have, how many like different obligations, expectations are placed on you, whether they're overtly expressed or assumed. Right?
Mm. And I love that you said like it goes against even like cultural or like conditioning in general, right? So like maybe it's
Mm-hmm.
like stepping outside of what you're conditioned to do. It could be at a
Mm-hmm.
family level, it could be at a like
Mm-hmm.
relational level. So, okay, I love that. All right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So to name a couple of examples, right? Like what I'm
Mm-hmm.
thinking about, for example, is like the first gen guilt of experiencing nicer things than your family might, right? So like maybe getting to travel
Yeah.
somewhere, getting to study something, like those kinds of experiences. Are there other ones that you see pop up typically in your practice?
Guilt every time we have to set any kind of boundary, right? Like, well, like you haven't had a day off, and you finally you have your day off, and you just want to stay home and relax. You just want to have one of those, I like to call them no socks days. Like you would just want to do nothing, almost read leisurely, whatever. For those of you, if this sounds foreign to you, then I want your homework is to do that, to try to give yourself some time and do nothing if you're able to, even if it's just an hour of like guilt-free do nothing time. Um, but uh, but yes, I see it in response to any kind of obligations people experience as well, right? And how I see it also manifests is anytime we feel that we've done something that someone may not approve of,
Mm.
we feel guilty, even if, that's why I bring up the rest. People feel guilty when they rest.
Yeah.
Um, People feel guilty when they say no. People feel guilty when they put themselves first. Like all of the things that I'm saying, eh, I think I have felt guilty of them at some point as well.
Do you feel like it manifests physically for people a lot, or is it like overthinking? Does it show up differently for different people?
I think that the way that our minds and bodies interact is always super fascinating because it differs by individual. I think some people might have that overthinking, the overanalyzing, but you might not notice that. You might just be more irritable, right? You might not notice all this. So you just might be a little bit grumpy, and you don't realize why you're grumpy, but you're probably grumpy because you're doing something you don't want to be doing. I think it also shows up a lot in defensiveness, like because you're already feeling guilty and someone asks you a question. It might be a very like innocent question, but you might snap and be like, why would you ask me that? Like, why is that? Like, what are you talking, like, I'm not in trouble, that's the tone, right? Like, I didn't do anything wrong, I just feel like I did, right? And so
Yeah.
those are some way, and physically, of course, manifesting. And it depends. For some people, like it's a lot of stomach, like bowel movement, like discomfort and issues. Other people, it might be like headaches. And for some, if you're feeling particularly anxious, it's that tightness in your chest, like feel like you almost
Mm.
can't breathe well because you're so uncomfortable.
And knowing that this is something that like we tend to maybe feel in different scenarios, like what is the first gen relationship to guilt? Why do we hold on to that and allow ourselves to feel that over and over again?
I think it's a big part of the culture. So I think one I'll say I think everyone, not just first gens, like guilt isn't exclusive to first gens, but I think the kind of guilt that first gens experience, which is often in family type settings, like or family obligations, um, I think that that's very cultural. So I think that it's ingrained in the way that we communicate, and in the way just that we generally interact. I think of when my mom wants to see me, instead of saying, I miss you, I'd like to spend time with you, it's, I haven't seen you, you don't come see me anymore, like, or you don't call me anymore. When it's a guilt trip. It's and that's the way they express themselves, right?
Mhm.
So I've learned to respond, oh, you miss me, mom. Like you could just tell me you miss me. I'll think that's
Mhm.
okay. And I'll make light of it now. And then and because I'm like, I don't know how else to communicate to her. I'm like, you could also just tell me.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Without being too, I don't like being too direct because it's a tricky balance, right? So I'm like, you could just
Yes.
tell me, mom, like it's okay, or whoever it is. And then that eases the like tension that you feel when that happens. Because the usual dynamic is, but the person guilting you, like we'll just keep the mom example, like you don't come see me anymore. Like, why don't you don't love me, you don't care about me.
Se te
And then
olvida que tienes mamá.
yeah, te olvida que tienes mamá, all of it, right? Yeah. And then what are you talking about? I was just there. I saw you last weekend. We spent time together. Like, what more do you want? I give you everything. I'm so busy. I'm so stressed. Like, can you like,
Hmm.
okay. We respond like that. What does that happen? It fuels the fire. Ya
Yeah.
ves? Ya ves? Yo hice todo mal. Like, and then now the mom continues, or whoever the parent continues the guilt trip and victimizes themselves. And now there's like the dynamic of the push-pull, and they're like, oh, I didn't mean to make you feel bad. I just was so overwhelmed. Now, if we shift that dynamic and we, instead of if noticing the defensiveness and realizing, is this person genuinely trying to guilt me and make me feel bad? Or what is the underlying message behind what they're communicating? Do they not know how else to share this? Now, this the way that I'm describing it, I know requires a little bit more of emotional insight and awareness around it. So like I want to honor that. Um, but that's part of why I'm such an advocate for like doing your own healing journey so that you can be in a space where you can notice, I'm feeling defensive right now. and then you get to make a choice, right? You get to respond instead of reacting. You get to decide, okay, the person who's giving me this guilt trip, is this someone who's really important to me? Is this someone who I want to maintain a relationship with? And if so, then you think, okay, why would they be saying this, right? And then you can approach it differently. It's like, oh, sounds like you want to see me. Like, why don't we make plans? I'm available this day, right? Then you can express like, this is when I'm available. I do want to spend time, and this is how I can do it.
I love that. I think like mindfulness is a big piece of like
Hmm.
neutralizing guilt, let's say, because one, you have to notice, like you said, what's the underlying message of that guilt trip that you're receiving, whether it's from someone else or an internalized voice, right? Because that same mom's voice or family member's voice sometimes ends up in our
Hmm.
minds. And so we're guilt tripping ourselves, like, oh, I'm having this weekend to myself when I could be visiting my family or going to help
Yeah.
them, etc. So number one, like practicing mindfulness, because then that will
Hmm.
lead to the awareness of like when the interactions are happening, then you can find a
Hmm.
way to neutralize it.
Hmm. Hmm. Exactly. So I love how you summarized what I shared so well. Look at that micro skill. But yeah, so being able to recognize that is important. And but know that right now, when I'm talking about this, we're also talking about again a dynamic where you have an opportunity to reflect and say, like, do I want to have a relationship with this person? Do I want to approach this differently? We are aware that there are some people who you think like who genuinely probably believe exactly what they're saying, and generally are wanting to guilt you or maybe have like a negative intent with what they say. And so like that you may choose to approach a little bit differently. So I want to honor that right now I'm talking about again the reciprocal dynamic. Like it's a relationship you'd like to have and the person, that they want to spend time with you.
The way I
Mhm.
see it too sometimes is like people are in their own world. So they're in their own tornado, right? And so, like, in their
Yes.
tornado, there's a storm. And it's like, do you want to get caught up in their tornado and like react without really thinking about it? So then you're swept up in their tornado and then you get spit out like, oh, that was exhausting. That was activating. Or like, I feel mad now.
Mhm.
So, like, getting to
Yes.
have the choice, like you said, isn't for every scenario, but sometimes when you can recognize, like, oh, okay, this person is upset, or this person in their world, there's something bad happening. Do I respond to it y tratar de explain myself, or do I take a step back and say, oh, okay, I see what's happening here. You miss.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. And then something that I'll add is we also have to be aware of like our emotional threshold for that day. So like everything I'm saying now is under the assumption that you have poured into yourself enough that you have the capacity to even stop and reflect. Because when we aren't taking care of ourselves, one of the ways you might know is like you'll feel irritable. It's like we're not, that's because we haven't taken care of certain needs that we have. And if we're not taking care of our basic needs, it's going to be very hard to be intentional with this kind of communication, because you're already coming from a deficit or deprived kind of mindset.
When is guilt like a positive in our lives as first gens?
The way that I think of guilt, like I guess we are talking about it in a very negative frame of mind. But remember when we started, I'm like, guilt is just also information. Right? And all of the different emotions that we experience, they're all information, right? Like we're feeling angry, we're probably feeling hurt, right? We're feeling sad, we're also feeling hurt. When we feel happy, we're feeling satisfied, content, we're not hungry. As a hanger individual, yes. Um, so when I would say like if we want to quantify between like good and bad, I think that good, I would think of guilt as good when you again have the tools where you can notice like where is this feeling coming from and what is this feeling trying to tell me? Like what am I feeling dissatisfied with? So let's say it's the inner voice. Oh, you should be doing more, you should be working harder, like you're not doing enough, like blah 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 blah. Um, so take notice and listen to that. It's like, okay, well, what's happening here? Are you feeling behind? Are you feeling insecure? Like what's the root of this feeling? Like what's bringing this up for you? And then maybe realizing like, oh, like I actually am so passionate about this project and I haven't started it because I'm afraid that I'm gonna do it wrong, but I feel guilty that I haven't started it. And I'm in this endless cycle of perfectionism and guilt, and none of it feels good, right? Um, and then instead it's, well, how do I then begin to shift this? If I listen to the guilt and the guilt is saying, you should be doing more. One, it's recognizing, well, do I want to do this? Because maybe we don't want to do that. If you don't want to, then don't force yourself. Or is it, I want to do this, but I'm afraid, or I'm like worried about X, Y, Z. Then we begin to shift it to, I feel guilty that I haven't worked on this because it's something that's very important to me. So how do I begin to make time? How do I make space for this so that this could be a priority? Right. So maybe it's like the squeaky wheel. What if we thought of guilt as the squeaky wheel? Like, hey, pay attention to me. There's a part of you that is needing some support. Maybe
Yeah.
that could be positive.
Yeah, digging in a little bit deeper because maybe we feel guilt as discomfort, and so it's like I need to
Mhm.
stop that. But if it's like, what is this discomfort telling me? I love that it opens the door for more, um, for deepening more than just like this feels bad and I don't want to feel this way, you know?
Mhm. Yeah, because I think most emotions that don't feel good, I want to say most people don't want to feel that way, right?
Yeah.
I don't think, it's like, I don't want to I don't want to sit in it. However, sometimes we sat in some emotions for so long that everything outside of that is a little bit too overwhelming or too scary, right? And so we only know what it's like to feel guilty. And so challenging it and listening to what the guilt is trying to tell you is a different kind of overwhelm. It's like, oh, what does this mean? Because this may be discomfort, like uncomfortable, but what the devil I know,
Ooh.
right?
I
Yeah.
love this because I think a lot of the people that listen are highly self-aware, let's say. And I think I'm gonna give them that credit. And I think like it could be a safety net, is what you're saying, in a way,
Mhm.
right? Like allowing yourself to feel guilty for something so then you don't do it. It could be like your way of staying, like maybe in some way feeling safe, right? And
Yeah.
preventing yourself from stepping into the next step, let's say, because maybe, oh no,
Mhm.
how would I dare, like do that or like,
So like, with everything, there's always nuance, right? So people are saying it's like,
yeah.
there's always a bit of nuance. And think about that. If that resonates for you, then recognize like, hey, maybe this, what I think is holding me back is actually like something that I am like how do I was like, it's not holding me back. I'm holding on to it. And
Ooh,
I don't know that I'm ready to let go because
yeah,
I know this feeling. What is it like to not feel guilty? Like, what do I do with all that time and energy? Like, and then there's anxiety about that, right? So what
yeah,
happens? What
yeah.
happens when we let go?
Ooh, yeah. Making it creates space, and sometimes space feels uncomfy. And then just something else that's just really like popping in my mind right now is
Mhm.
that guilt that first gens experience in experiencing life, I feel. Whether it's because our families don't have the opportunity and or they're also in their safety net where they don't want to
Yeah.
experience more or different. So like maybe they don't want to leave the state. Let's say they're able to.
Mhm.
Let's say they have the status to leave the state, but
Yeah.
they don't want to go on vacation anywhere that's not in the home state. So you get to do that and you feel the
Mhm.
guilt of like, oh, my family should be here.
Yeah.
What about that kind of feeling? Because I think it's more of yourself. No one's making you feel guilty.
So with this, I want to bring up an example that you shared during our part one.
Okay.
And so it was, it's about birthdays. So, you shared, let's just like break this down a little bit, right? You shared that your mom, when she was a little girl or growing up, never had birthday celebrations. So that was a priority for you to be able to have birthdays every year, for you to have your cake, whatever treat it was. Now, let's say as a kid, maybe we're not as aware of it, right? But
Mhm.
when you can see it, you're like, wow, my mom made all these sacrifices just for me. So let's say as a kid, you're having this cake and you know, wow, my mom didn't get to have cake. And you're thinking, man, like I don't know that I want to eat this. Like she's got this for me, but she didn't get to have this herself. Like, how do I feel about this? And maybe because she's there, you're like, well, we're getting to sort of share this cake, so it's okay. Like, I'm sort of sharing this with her. Um, so then let's try to transfer this example to travel, right?
Mhm.
Let's say your mom, that's just not something that she got to do, but she gets to experience it through you or with you, depending on her comfort level, right? Depending on both of your, and also the dynamic you have. Um, and again, she did all of this so that you had these opportunities, so that you could enjoy, so that you could expose, right? So I think of my parents and lots of other children and immigrants I work with who's like they feel this exact guilt, like I have these nice things.
Mhm.
And like, hey, my mom still works at CVS and my dad currently works cleaning pools. My dad cannot swim. Every time he goes to work, I always am a
Wow.
little bit panicked. Um, and but they're but they're content with their lives and they have everything that they wanted. And so when you have that guilt kind of creeping in, I think what this is the information I take from that is like, when's the last time I actually talked to my family around what their wants, needs, and dreams are? Because I'm having such a good time and I think everyone would love this. Everyone wants to be here. Like how amazing. I'm on this vacation, I'm on this whatever. But you don't know what is, unless you've asked your family, you don't know what is actually bringing them the joy. Like you don't know that they find so much joy in seeing your photos from your trip and hearing about your trip and being like, Mija, it makes me so happy that you get to have these experiences, right? Like, but we don't get to know that unless we have that conversation. So
Yeah.
to me, the guilt of like luxury as a first gen is a conversation to be had with like the people who prompt that guilt to come in.
Yeah, like communication when possible. A lot
Mm-hmm.
of first gens also carry the guilt of not being able to retire their parents. So including myself, I carried this for so long and like my dad still does like a manual job, my mom works two
Mm-hmm.
jobs. So what helped me let go of that guilt was communication. It was having this conversation with my dad and saying, "Dad, I'm so sorry that I haven't been able to retire you, like I wish at this age I could have retired you." And him saying like, "Mija, it's fine. Like y a mí me gusta trabajar. I don't know what else I would be doing, like obviously I still want to retire him as soon as I can, but at least I
Mm-hmm.
like it I felt like that guilt kind of lost its power, because it was so strong and it was so unspoken and I just carried it every single day. And when I would hear about
Mm-hmm.
him talk about his job, it didn't make me happy, it made me sad, But now knowing
Mm-hmm.
like he finds joy in learning and finding new things in his job,
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, okay, this helps, communicating helps. But it's not something
Yes.
that we're taught sometimes.
It's not. It's not. And so I thank you so much for sharing that example of you and your dad, right? Like when you open that line of communication, you learned like he's happy. He's like, I'm
Yeah.
not in any rush to retire. I'm okay. Or happy enough. You of course, I think it's like we love people. We always want the best for them in the same way that the people who love us want the best for us,
Yeah.
right? So like it's also needing to put yourself in that position. Like I'm feeling this because I love and care for this person and I want them to have the best. And I'm getting to have the best. Meanwhile, on the other end, the person who loves you is like, the person I love is getting to have the best. And that makes me so happy. Right.
Exactly.
And I get to have the best of the things that I like, and that makes me happy. Right. And so, you know, I think I learned really quickly that my parents find comfort in the smaller things they like. My parents, if I take them out to eat, anywhere, which again, remember, they still try to end up paying for it themselves. It's a whole thing.
We learned in part one.
We learned in part one. But I like tried. I'm like, oh, my dad likes steak. Let me take him to a nice steakhouse. Let me like do this. My dad's favorite place to go to is the buffet near the house.
Mm.
They will enjoy boiling crab 10 times more than they will enjoy the fanciest meal that I take them to. And I've learned I've learned that I'm like, whatever luxuries I want to introduce them to, because I'm like, oh, I think they'll really like this. It's not anything they want. It's
Mm.
nothing they like. They are, and I'm like, oh, let's go somewhere. Mom, I don't want you to have to cook. We can, no, no, no. It's like, I like cooking for you. I like bringing you things. Like, every time I see my mom, she sends me home with bean and cheese burritos. Like, she's like, you need to make sure
Oh,
you have food. And so, like that's how they show their love, right? So it's also
yeah.
reminding yourself, like, how are they showing you love?
Yeah. And that our experience isn't theirs just because we think they're gonna love this
Yeah.
or they would have
Yes.
loved this and they're gonna be mad that they're not here. Like it's not necessarily reality, right? Yeah.
No,
Mhm.
no, not necessarily. Reality is, they just want, get their tacos on the
Yeah.
corner, going to Jamaica, to whatever,
Yeah.
and hang out and watch TV, and they're happy. And that's great, right?
Yeah.
But, we'll see. Like I said in part one, I was like, I do want to go to El Salvador with my mom. And I think some kind of trip like that, I'm hoping she'll be open to it sometime soon.
Hopefully too, she's seeing that it's safer.
It
I've been
is.
hearing that a lot too from like my best friend Salvadorian. She's going actually next month. So yeah, it's I
Awesome.
know it's encouraging a lot of people to be able to go back. So hopefully that encourages her too.
Yeah, yeah. We have family there still, and literally all her siblings, everyone else has gone back. Papa Vidal, who's like my mom's like oldest sibling slash father figure, he he lives there. He
Oh,
lives in El
okay.
Salvador, and he's lived there for a few years now. And like he's there's of course been some challenges and things that happen, but he's okay, and like everyone's okay, and so but we'll get there
Yes.
if she wants it. I guess I should say if she wants to, we'll get there.
Yeah. Honoring
No,
her boundaries.
yeah, gotta honor the boundary. I know it's like, yeah, I'm over here, respect my boundaries. I'm like, I gotta respect hers too.
Yeah.
um
Mm.
and I'll say that's a hard lesson sometimes when there's something that you really want your family to be involved in. Um, like, and I'll share this briefly, but it's like I got married last year, and there was I had an image of what it would be like to have my mom involved or my parents involved in certain things, and they were, but multiple times my husband he had to tell me, like, doesn't sound like your parents want to go to this. Just like, it's okay if they don't. Don't make them feel pressured like they have to. Like, it's like, make sure they meet them where they're at. Do with them what they want to do. Because I'm like, oh, let's bring my mom to go dress shopping with me, do these things with me. But it was all just too much for her. And so she did it, and she enjoyed. But then I learned, I was like, okay, maybe they don't have to come to all of these other things. I'll just share. Hey, I'm doing this. If you want to come, like, this is when it is, and if not, it's okay. Because I was building it up in my head, like, oh, it'll be so nice for us to do this together. But they didn't. It's so different. How weddings happen now are so different than how they did many years ago. And mine was an interracial wedding, so there's like a lot of just newness that could
Yeah.
be very overwhelming. And so going back to like respecting their boundaries. That was that example.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah, like kind of not projecting onto others, right? Like you're
Yeah.
just because you have an idea doesn't mean it's going to be the same for them. So, not projecting, honoring boundaries,
Yeah.
communication, all good
Yeah.
tools.
Exactly.
Awareness, mindfulness, all of that.
Yes, yes. And I think that the biggest one here too is challenging, again, going back to the narrative, challenging the narrative of what does guilt mean? And we put it in the like bad category, but
Mm.
like you said, it's like it's not necessarily bad. I think and it can be positive, and it can be like it's just sometimes I think about it first, it's just information, but
It can
sitting
be
in
a sign of
discomfort.
love. I just thought
Yes.
about that. Guilt can be a
Yes.
sign of love.
Yes.
Aw, see, we love guilt. No, I'm just
We
kidding.
don't love the
No,
feeling
no.
of it, but It is. It can be. Like when with the examples of like I'm guilting you because I love you and I miss you and I want to see you. But this is the way I learned to communicate love through guilt. Because that's the way it was shared with me, whatever, right? Um, and we can hold space for that and also hold space for the cycle breakers who don't want to have to
Yeah.
navigate that nuance, right?
Yeah. Thank you so, so much for having this conversation with
Thank
us.
you.
I know that guilt is a big thing in the first gen community. So I definitely wanted to
Mhm.
have an episode surrounding that. And I was like, you're the perfect person to have that with. So yeah, thank you so, so much. And I want to be
Thank you.
respectful of your time. So if you just want to invite them to follow you and then we'll wrap
Yeah.
up part two.
All right. Also, yeah. So please follow me online. I am the First Gen Psychologist on Instagram. So my business is called Calathea Wellness. And so I named it Calathea because I love plants. This is a Calathea. This is the plant I bought the day I moved things out of my office at my full-time job when I transitioned. This
Wow.
plantita has had moments, it's been hard, but it has been with me since day one of me becoming a full-time entrepreneur. So we're here. This is a
Oh,
very
we
special
love her.
plantita. We love her. So she's a calathea. And so calatheas are a type of plant that has a circadian rhythm. So right now, as you see, her leaves
Oh.
are open. At night, they will close up. So they open to take in light and then they close up during the night. Um, and calatheas represent new beginnings, to turn over a new leaf. And in my work with FirstGens, right, so oftentimes it's about a new beginning because it's your journey of shifting the narrative that you've had, shedding the old narrative and entering into the new narrative of your greatness, whatever that is. So Calathea, and wellness, because wellness is it's just a big part of like mental health. And so that's my website, Calathea Wellness. And again, the first gen psychologist. And I share resources on first gen mental health. And I often write about the first gen experience and mental health for currently it's for Hip Latina, but I'm available to freelance write for other publications as well. I do individual therapy, but I'm based in California. So I'm only licensed to see clients in California. They could be anywhere in California, but if you want to work with me, you have to live in California if you're working with me in a therapy capacity. I also offer like consultation services. And so it's called like a pick my brain consultation, and that's for both just anyone who might just be interested in what I do in any capacity, just wanting to learn more about how I do it, whether it's, and I'll share more about the other things I do. So I offer that. So if any of the things that I say next are interesting, like I'm always happy to talk about and open up some dialogue space for that. And so I do speaking engagements. And so I speak on the first gen experience, Latina mental health, and like intergenerational trauma. And then I write about all of this. I say therapy, speak, write, consult, but all of it is within this area of expertise that I have.
All right, awesome. Okay, so yeah, I'll link your information below as well as
Yeah.
your website. I love that offering of like pick your brain because you have a lot
Yeah.
of expertise. So I'm assuming too, does it have to do with like your experience getting your PhD as well?
Hmm.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, yeah. So that's students, professionals, or allies, like people who want to learn more about how to work with first gens. So that's a big part of that offering as well.
Well, Lizette, thank you so much for your time and for being here and your knowledge and what you do for our community. And thank you guys for listening. If you found this helpful, please make sure that you like it, that you subscribe
Mhm.
to the podcast, and that you share it
Mhm.
with anyone that you think would find it helpful. Other than that,
Thank
we
you.
hope you have a good rest of your day.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.